Welcome to the Reading Cave. Today we have the best comments from r/AskReddit. What happened at a wedding that made it obvious that the bride and groom shouldn't be getting married? Are they still together? My sister-in-law got married last fall, and after the ceremony they got in an epic fight over the marriage certificate and didn't come to the reception until 2 hours after it started. A week later, they separated for a few weeks while trashing each other on Facebook. They're still together and she's now pregnant. Edit: I also photographed this wedding and it was the most stressful professional experience I've ever had. I forgot to mention too that the groom and groomsmen dropped a bunch of acid before the ceremony and continued into the reception. He freaked out, had a panic attack, and left. Dropping acid before your own wedding is a bold move. I bet that would be a horrible trip. I mean, everyone is already staring at you for the whole thing, that's unnerving enough. But to trip on top of that, I'd probably run away. When the priest equivalent said you may kiss the bride, she turned so that it would be a kiss on the cheek. Even as a child, that set off alarm bells. They have been divorced for a long time. They got married after a 10-year relationship. The wedding was painful to watch as they had such a bad fight the night before. They barely spoke to each other all day, hardly looked at each other. They split up 8 weeks later. I know 3 couples who were together for over 10 years before getting married and none of them worked out. You'd think they'd have a good foundation in the relationship, but I guess getting married sets different expectations, and by that point, no one wants to change anymore. Maybe after such a long time the reason to get married might also be an attempt to save an already failing relationship. On their first dance, he kept trying to kiss her and she would avoid it very subtly. I noticed that and thought, I don't think she loves him. I wasn't wrong, they divorced within the first year. I saw a video of the first dance like this. My brother-in-law taped it and said this couple is getting divorced. Not even 3 months later they were divorced. My good friend was marrying this guy. We will call him Ned. Ned definitely had a drinking problem that everyone swept under the rug. He promised my friend he would keep it under wraps for the wedding. He made it down the aisle, but by the reception he was binge drinking. By the end of the night the groom Ned completely disappeared. No one could find him. A few nervous laughs turned into mild panic when the lights were turned on in an effort to find him. My husband decided to go look for him in the parking lot, where he finds Ned on his lips in the dirt. He had smoked a joint and got the spins. My husband tried to talk sense into him, reminding him, this is your wedding, dude. He got Ned to come inside and did the most cringy walk of shame past the bride's family, who was very cross with him. Ned was supposed to drive them 11 miles from the venue to their hotel in bride's grandfather's vintage Corvette. He was too drunk to drive, so the bride's grandfather drove them and the bride had to sit on the middle armrest with no seat belts. Grandpa drops them at the hotel. Bride barely gets the groom up to the room, where he passes out on the bed. Bride had to wander the halls looking for someone to help her out of her wedding dress since her groom was passed out drunk. The word annulment was definitely floating around that next morning. As crushed as the bride was, she stuck it out. 3 years later they are now separated and divorcing because he is still a drunk. Shortly after the ceremony the groom announced to everyone, including his bride, my niece, that he had enlisted in the Navy and was due to report in a few weeks. She was beyond surprised. They didn't even make it a year. Made a life-altering decision without involving or even informing the spouse. Such a surprise it didn't work out. At a friend's wedding, 2 years ago, the bride kept the bar open until 3 a.m. after the groom went home at 10 p.m. She kept telling everyone that she is just with him because he has money and a flat. They are now going through a divorce after she cheated on him. Tale as old as time. Song as old as rhyme. We were good friends with a couple who fought all the time. She wanted to get married desperately and he was indifferent. After years of nagging he finally proposed. On the day of the wedding, right before he walked out, he looked at us and sighed, well, maybe now she will stop nagging at me and finally be effing happy. They are now divorced. She cheated on him with some guy she used to date. He was caught doing coke in the car before the wedding started. The bride was pregnant at the time. They're still married. Fight constantly and now want another baby. They don't call it a white wedding for nothing. The bride got so drunk that the bar cut her, and everyone else, off. The groom was also drunk. People started leaving at midnight, and the bride got mad and yelled about how they were all ruining her wedding because she wanted to dance and drink more. I was their designated driver to get them to their hotel. The entire drive there, they fought. She berated him. He cried. That was a long 20-minute drive. I could have scrubbed vomit out with cleaners, but the awkwardness has stained that car forever. They've been together 7 years. Their daughter, born 9 months after the wedding, is adorable. About an hour before my cousin's wedding, she made the comment that her next wedding wasn't going to be as big and complicated. She was right. Her second wedding was super small. While getting up the stairs, the groom stepped on the bride's gown. She turned and slapped him and called him blind. He turned the other way and left. A wedding guest looking out of the window beamed at the groom waiting at the altar and said, "She's here," and the groom jokingly pretended to run away. It went down like a lead balloon because he had actually run away the previous year, literally went out to the shops and didn't come back for 8 weeks, while she was pregnant with their first child. The bride's mother gave him a look that would have wilted the wedding flowers, and happy chatter in the room turned to frosty silence, just in time for the entrance of the bride. They are still together many years later and have had more children together, but I wouldn't describe them as happily married. The way you described the bride's mother's face was fantastic, lol. Bride kept telling anyone who'd listen that she booked the wedding through Groupon and it was super cheap. They hadn't planned to get married until she saw the deal online. Not sure how long it lasted, but she posted a sarcastic comment about how successful her marriage was on Facebook on her first anniversary, using the memories feature. The wedding was fake. Bride and groom were quite young and dated happily for several months. Bride was in a hurry to settle down, I think to fit in with our friendship group who had or were doing the same, and pushed for engagement, and groom was reasonably happy to oblige but not ready to take the next step and wanted a long engagement. Bride began pushing to set wedding dates almost immediately. Groom's mother and father were unwell with both physical and mental health issues. Getting closer to the wedding date, groom made it known that he loved bride but wasn't ready to settle down yet. Bride wasn't having any of it and complained to her own immediate family about this, who start harassing groom's parents about how he's a dog, mistreating their daughter, etc. Groom agrees to go ahead with the wedding if bride's family leave his parents alone. Wife wasn't happy with this, and called the celebrant to talk some sense into him. Celebrant refused to perform a wedding where one party wasn't on board. Bride insisted the event go ahead, and that they pretend it was real, but with a bunch of guests who had been married or attended weddings recently, we all immediately noticed the celebrant didn't say the words legally required for marriage. Edit, in Australia, evidently this isn't a requirement elsewhere, and no paperwork was signed. Groom's parents refused to attend the reception, leaving table 1 half empty, and not paying for the bar service. Guests took back their gifts. Bride and groom avoided each other the entire time except for a super awkward first dance. The whole thing was super surreal and awkward. They split up a couple of months later. Well. At her bachelorette party she broke down, drunk, and told us that she knew she shouldn't marry him and that she knew it wouldn't work. We begged her not to go through with it. But she did. On the day of the wedding, his uncle pulled him aside and said, "You don't have to do this," while counting out $100 bills. The wedding was delayed due to a storm. This caused the bride to get angry and snap at everyone who even tried to talk to her. Finally the storm let up and the wedding took place. Mid-reception the bride angrily stormed out of the reception. And that kind of broke up the festivities. No, they are not still married. She started cheating on her husband less than a year in and they divorced shortly thereafter. This was 15 to 16 years ago. He remarried a year or so later, and is still married to that woman. She just finished up her second divorce. I haven't talked to her in years because, well, she's a really toxic person who does not see how her actions contribute directly to her misery, and I no longer live in our tiny hometown, so I don't have to be friends with shitty people I don't like that much anyway. I love the uncle trying to bribe him not to do it. I just imagine him looking like Michael Corleone with a couple of heavies behind him. Didn't know them personally, but there was a story in my town of the bride walking in on the groom sexually assaulting the maid of honor at the wedding. And they went through with the wedding anyway. Then said bride was the maid of honor at her maid of honor's wedding a week or two later. And I think it was sometime after this that the maid of honor reported the assault. I think this wins the most fucked up prize in this thread. Well, the wedding was in his parents' lounge. It was a quickie wedding and she was 8 months pregnant, both very young. He paused partway through his vows and said, "I love my child, that's why I'm doing this." Then he cried. I tried to stop it, told him not to do it out of obligation to the child. He said he had to. She glared at me and his parents were furious at me. They got married, had 3 kids, cheated on each other all through their marriage. He's with someone else now and both have kids to other people. She's a single mom now, but he cheated on his new partner with her and they tried to make it work before giving up again and reverting back to him going back to his partner and her being single. They have a weird connection, I guess. The bride showed up late to her own wedding, crying and needing to compose herself because she just said goodbye to the other guy she was seeing. It lasted maybe 6 months. Why the F do people do this to themselves? Why the F do people do that to other people? It ended before a wedding took place because the bride admitted to cheating on him. The bride's family had already paid for the reception, so they had a family party where they trash-talked the groom and ate the catering food. They trash-talked him despite their daughter being the cheater? Yep. She had a big ego and her family thought she was amazing. It was a very strange situation. One of my wife's sorority sisters got married recently. We're not that close and I don't know the groom, but every time I've seen her she's been belligerently drunk. At her wedding reception, she got blackout drunk and thought it would be funny to hide under a table. But then she spilled wine on her dress and started crying. New husband tried to get her to come back out and socialize and she ended up smashing a glass into his face and sending him to the ER. She almost bragged about it when she told the story. Like a no one tells me what to do kind of thing. They were going to get a divorce, but ended up getting pregnant instead. I went to a wedding and the bride and groom barely stood next to each other the whole night unless they were at their table. The groom was more at the bar than with his now wife. Their dance was them awkwardly avoiding eye contact, not speaking, and just awkward for everyone. The wedding didn't feel like a wedding. Every single person was questioning why they got married from family to friends. They are still together. The bride was constantly on her phone and very often had to go to the bathroom with it, like a lot. She did this a lot the year of the wedding, and on the day something didn't seem right. So someone followed her. She went into one of those family bathrooms that only had one toilet in it, and she forgot to lock the door. One of the bridesmaids opens the door and the bride is spread eagle finger blasting herself on FaceTime with an ex-BF. Wedding obviously was stopped at this point. Groom was furious. Turns out she had been cheating on the groom pretty much the entire time they had ever been together. Holy shit, I wasn't expecting this to blow up so much. To answer some questions. No, they didn't get married. I have no idea if her and the bridesmaid are still friends. As far as I know, the bride moved on to the next victim. I ran into the groom maybe 4 months after this all happened. He said when he left the reception, he went and packed a suitcase, and flew to Jamaica for like 2 weeks, quit his job, changed his phone number, and when he came back, she was gone. Doesn't know where she is and doesn't care. He sold his house and bought a piece of property and built a small house on it, like 700 sq feet. I don't remember what he does for a living now. But he made it clear he will never trust another woman again. Haven't seen him since then. My sister was getting married and found her soon-to-be husband's phone. It has text messages from to a girl saying, if you tell me leave her, I will right now. Mind you, it was the day or their wedding. She went through with the wedding because she was pregnant. 8 years later they are stronger than. Oh wait, no, they divorced. They were both high on heroin and this wedding was all planned by the bride's family the same day as they had decided to get married the night before. The groom's family didn't even show up, so he only had his best friend attend. The reception was just a big table at the same restaurant where the bride's, now divorced, parents had their wedding reception. This was when the bride's best friend decided to tell her family that she was on drugs. They spend their wedding night getting high using the cash they were gifted. I am thankfully no longer married and am now sober. That took a twist, but good for you. Please subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications. Also leave a like if you enjoyed this video or a dislike if you hated it. Comment down below if you've predicted the outcome of a marriage from the wedding day.